So I got some bad news. You're probably not going to like Stalker 2, at least at first. Stalker 2 reviews came out earlier today, and since many of you don't have the time to read through all of these, I did, or at least watched and read a ton of these initial reviews so we could cut through some of that nonsense and look at the bigger picture of what Stalker 2 got right and what it got wrong. Because yeah, despite the relatively positive overall review score, this is definitely a game with some problems, and it's not even all just bugs. This game definitely has other issues, such as the intro. Like I mentioned before, whether you're an OG Stalker fan or completely new to the series, nearly all of these reviews have criticized the introduction of the game, describing dumb initial quests, a plethora of information that just makes things confusing off the bat, and like the intro to Stalker 2 was designed to make you quit the game. But thankfully, many of these reviews also mention how things will dramatically pick up as you progress a bit further. So if you start this game and despise the first couple of hours, keep going, because it does seem like it gets better, particularly once you make it to the second area. And even outside of that, Stalker 2 was described as a game that opens up relatively quickly, so you could branch off from that main quest if you want to and really start doing your own thing. But overall, Stalker 2 was described as akin to a Fallout 3 or even a Fallout 4 type experience without some of those AAA extras. This game is grueling and won't hold your hand, but if you're a fan of those past Stalker games, almost every review I found said that you'll love this one, and even how there are quite a few callbacks to some of those older games if you've played them. While conversely, several reviewers did state that if you aren't a Stalker fan, it's very likely that this game won't connect with you. The questing in Stalker 2 was super divisive among reviewers, not in that they disagreed, but most reviewers actually felt quite similarly here in that the main quest is pretty lackluster, but some of the choice and consequences that you experience in this game through the main and side quests are really cool and one of the best features overall. So the actual writing and story isn't the best, but the consequence and reactivity is some of the best. When it comes to the main story, this was described as a more scripted experience with some larger set pieces being used during the experience. While conversely, those side quests are more just things you'll stumble upon in the world and often are fairly fetch questy, as you're largely just running somewhere to get or do something and then returning. But that isn't always a bad thing. Most reviewers did not enjoy the main story of Stalker 2. It had descriptions ranging from underwhelming to just flat out awful. And one of the most common complaints was the pacing of the main story. Reportedly, things are very slow moving. They do pick up around the 15 to 20 hour mark, but this is described as less unbearable as opposed to actually being good. The story will have you darting all over, and it feels somewhat aimless initially, but as you do progress a bit further, things start to come together. But even among reviewers who really enjoyed Stalker 2, with one of them saying it was their personal game of the year, the story was still a major criticism. Reportedly, it constantly feels like you're about to get to the climax, but then you once again have to do a bunch of other quests that will pop up, pushing the climax back further and further, and that just isn't super enjoyable. Thankfully, Stalker 2 doesn't hinge on this main story, and even among reviewers who really didn't like it, they still did enjoy the game overall. Because the core of Stalker 2 was described as just kind of wandering around and experiencing this vast open world. The darker parts of this world are the humans. Their actions are some of the most horrific stories told here, and overall, Stalker 2 was described as being a morally gray game, and doing a great job at sticking to that. Choices aren't as obviously good or bad. It's not really clear who the good or bad guys are during a lot of the points, and a lot of reviewers really enjoyed that. You'll encounter plenty of aggressors trying to take you out, but also plenty of people just trying to survive in this world. And oftentimes, you won't immediately know how to proceed in a given situation. If these people are super friendly or hostile, you'll spend lots of time just listening in this game, trying to figure out what the best next step for you is. But this game also has an immense amount of choice and reactivity in both main and side objectives. There'll be lots of encounters where enemies are going to want to fight you, but the game gives you a wide array of choices on how to deal with those encounters, whether it be combat, branching dialogue paths that you can choose from, or as some reviewers described, you could sneak around to find this group's real plan and then use that as an alternative quest pathway. And some of the encounters you come up against in Stalker 2 will even vary based off what choices you make. So let's say you die, which you'll be doing a lot in this game, and then have to repeat this same exact encounter multiple times, you'll often find that, yeah, it leads to different outcomes on subsequent attempts. because the world could get involved with just some kind of random occurrence, or whatever you're doing can dramatically impact things. Almost every single review described a great degree of reactivity from this world, although this wasn't always there. Stalker 2 has a lot of scripted encounters, and you could easily pass the bounds of these, effectively ending them. So like, let's say you come up against a bunch of NPCs doing something, and the game clearly wants you to do a certain thing to progress this encounter, but it's not obvious. So if you do the wrong thing, all of a sudden everyone will just aggro and start attacking you, and you're simply left confused as to what you did wrong. Although thankfully this was definitely the minority experience, and most people really enjoyed the amount of reactivity. So while some reviewers did describe how side quests felt like open world busywork, this wasn't actually a bad thing, because the world was consistently interesting, and many of these quests had tons of interesting possibilities. It very much so sounds like a kill almost everything playthrough will be possible in Stalker 2. The quests do have that degree of outcome on a wide scale. Another reviewer said how side missions had some of the best world building of the game overall. You could actually get to see the people who live here and hear stories from them, which could at times be really tragic stories. But one of the major complaints was that side missions were described as having lackluster rewards, particularly when compared to some of the rewards from main story missions. And overall, when it comes to the questing in Stalker 2, it's really more about the story you experience than the story the developers are trying to tell you. This again is a highly reactive world that will have different stories for different players with a wide array of quest outcomes. And a massive part of your time with Stalker 2 will just be experiencing the world here. If you love that big open world where everyone wants to kill you, this game has that, and this game will probably be for you. But a major component of all of this is that things in Stalker 2 are intentionally grueling. Nearly all of the reviewers mention how Stalker 2 is not going to be a game for everyone as a result of many of these mechanics. None of the reviews I read outright called the game a running simulator, but it seems like it gets decently close at points. You'll have this vast open world, and there's going to be plenty of moments where you run 5 minutes to go talk to someone or kill them for a quest, and then basically just have to run 5 minutes backwards to where you got the quest to turn it back in. And yeah, this will be similar to past games. If you've played other Stalker games, it definitely has this. But the big consideration with Stalker 2 is the map now is far larger. So reportedly, this running around doesn't work nearly as well because, yeah, Stalker 2 does not feature fast travel. And the impression I got was that many reviewers felt like fast travel mods would be coming and end up being very popular for this game. But at the same time, this was also described as a strong point for immersion, because when you're leaving your base in Stalker 2, you really have to be prepared. You have to have all of your gear in order because the world can be grueling and you'll be spending a decent amount of time out there. Exclusion zones are back and said to be a really fun component of the game. Exclusion zones will feature a lot of trial and error gameplay where you're going to die to things and then over time have to learn how to deal with them. There's a wide array of anomalies, and as you evolve over the course of the game, you'll learn how to deal with them. And peeling the layers back on anomalies and really the game overall, taking certain lessons from combat or various encounters and growing with this game, was described in multiple reviews as a major positive. Stalker 2 seems to be one of those games where you're going to really struggle at first, but as you start to learn the game, it becomes increasingly rewarding. Artifact hunting is back as well, but some people felt that this was quite bad in Stalker 2, largely due to the fact that artifacts generally aren't the best in Stalker 2, and even some returning ones from some of the previous Stalker games have been heavily nerfed or reworked compared to those past games. But just at a high level, exploring the open world of Stalker 2 to find some good loot and then succeed in that next firefight is where this game is going to really shine. Almost every single reviewer described how the organic evolution you go through as you learn how to handle things in this world and improve your gear is a massive positive. But also, this game has a very unique world and it's incredibly unpredictable. It's a game that feels like it has endless exploration because, yeah, this world is massive. Things can just kind of happen in this open world and it's better for that. One reviewer described how they were fighting a big bad and they were struggling to take them down. But then all of a sudden, a group of soldiers were passing by and end up joining in the firefight. It totally turns the tides of that battle with the big bad being taken down relatively easily, and the reviewer could pick off the remnants of those soldiers players to get some nice loot for themselves. Though seemingly random or chaotic outcomes are often present in Stalker 2, and almost every reviewer really enjoyed this aspect. And just overall, Stalker 2's world was consistently described as a totally unique experience that other games just aren't able to match right now, with some unparalleled atmospheric tension. This is a world where you will have to survive though. After reading several reviews, it seems like the survival systems are either just easy or kind of underbaked. Lots of reviews didn't actually mention survival at all, like it literally didn't come up, which seems kind of crazy. But basically, each of the survival systems in Stalker 2 has an item that'll help you resolve it. Like, yeah, you need some food from time to time, so you have to eat a candy bar. But those items were readily available and found in abundance according to some reviewers, so struggling to survive just wasn't really a thing. You always had the items you need, or they were close by. Other reviewers did counter this point somewhat, saying that items can be scarce, but it really seems like this comes down to playing on higher difficulties, as reviewers did say that depending on which difficulty you play Stalker 2 on, the game totally changes. Play on the highest difficulties and Stalker 2 becomes far more of a management game, while on low difficulties, things are almost too easy where the game just becomes kind of simple and not nearly as enjoyable. Sadly, it's really hard to gauge this because very few reviewers actually revealed which difficulty they were playing on. I have a stinking suspicion that some of these reviews that were saying things are too easy were just trying to burn through the game as quickly as possible and playing on the easiest difficulty as a result. Although, one aspect of the world that did get widespread criticism here was the encumbrance system. This is getting quite a bit of attention as Skill-Up spent a fairly large portion of their review discussing this. And although I understand some of the criticisms because, yeah, carrying 4 AKs not very Stalker-esque, multiple other reviewers, including some who are veteran Stalker players, also took issue with the encumbrance system in Stalker 2. It's not just Skill-Up. Stalker 2 does not feature fast travel, so there's lots of walking around very slowly when you're over encumbered. And some missions will reportedly give you heavy items right off the bat while you're not really near any place to store items. So as a result, you're just forced to walk around over encumbered for extended durations. Reviewers mentioned how some areas felt like they should have had more NPCs to offload gear to, and encumbrance overall definitely seems like a frustrating feature for a lot of people. This too was an aspect of the game that a lot of people seem to suspect would be heavy on mods, making it easier. And when it comes to combat, this is another system that had some more mixed reactions overall, but one thing that was consistently reiterated among all of the reviewers is how Stalker 2 is a thoughtful game. You'll spend lots of times thinking about how you want to approach a situation, and that was described as a big positive. Stalker 2 is not a run and gun game, thank God. Weapons will feel and sound good, while also featuring many weapons from past games, so long-term fans should enjoy that. And Stalker 2 does have that realism component, where combat is a bit slower and more punishing. Time to kill is much shorter here. Although, as you do upgrade your gear and your weapons, combat does become a bit easier. Although, some other reviewers, including those who have played past Stalker games, said the opposite, where combat in Stalker 2 was a bit too easy, and weapons are notably more accurate, removing those extended gunfights that were present in some of the earlier games. And the word hit scanning did come up in some of these reviews, where it just felt like both you and enemies were able to land shots a bit too easily now. But honestly, this is more of a minority opinion, with most describing combat as largely satisfying and suitably difficult, although combat enjoyment definitely varied widely depending on who you were fighting. Combat against humans largely was described as feeling good and engaging. The weapons feel loud and powerful, but one of the other consistent complaints about this game was how enemy AI, particularly human enemy AI, could be really dumb at points, and how getting through combat quickly becomes the game of kind of spamming bandages or first aid kits because almost everything can make you start bleeding. But that combat overall against humans was broadly enjoyable, and a nice touch of Stalker 2 is every human has a unique name, so it does genuinely feel like you're taking down hordes of people, not random NPCs. But yeah, bad combat AI is sadly a very common complaint through these reviews. Some enemies just kind of run at you without much concern, making them easy to take down. Grenade spam seems to be a thing. Several reviews mention getting spammed with grenades right as you enter into combat. Enemies will get stuck periodically. It seems like this will be one of the bugs of the game, but basically an enemy will just be standing in place trying to fight you. And some of the AI could just be generally dumb, not even just in combat. As reportedly, sometimes during these fireside chats, some of the AI just bugs out or doesn't actually talk, or will cut in and then cut out rapidly. Unfortunately, mutant enemies were far more universally disliked by reviewers as they start to feel very samey, and combat against mutants is almost almost always just enemies sprinting at you, trying to melee attack you, and then you having to shoot them. Several reviewers said how you basically always have to carry a shotgun just because of the mutant enemies. Veteran Stalker players said mutants feel dumbed down compared to past games. The AI is clearly a downgrade, where now enemies just sprint at you, like I mentioned, as opposed to past games where there was a more coordinated pack attack. And just overall, when it came to mutant enemy combat, there was very little positive said by reviewers. There is going to be a large variety of weapons in Stalker 2, but encumbrance will somewhat limit your exposure to those new weapons because you just literally won't be able to carry them. And lots of the weapons you'll find will be broken, and dealing with weapon repair and maintenance feels harder compared to past Stalker games. Weapons break really fast in this one, and many of the weapons you find will be on the cusp of breaking. But some other reviewers found equipment durability to be totally fair, so this could be another one that will vary by difficulty. Again, it would have been really nice to know what difficulty many of these reviewers are playing on. But all of the weapons in Stalker 2 do have unique upgrade trees, so you will grow with them. And getting new weapons, upgrading them, and evolving in combat encounters feels really good and satisfying in this game. There's a nice amount of variety there. The repair system was described as insanely expensive, and with carry weight being so limited, this leads to weird scenarios where you simply cannot afford to have fixed up gear, particularly in the early to mid game. Stealth was another weird feature where it really didn't get mentioned all that often. Some reviews said it was downright broken, but most of these reviews just never brought up stealth in Stalker 2, which kind of feels hard to comprehend. Although what was said was largely negative, and how enemies can somehow see you through walls or just see you in general way too often, and how some stealth takedowns just wouldn't work in this game. And at a high level, some of the veteran Stalker players did mention how Stalker 2 felt like it had less combat overall. But as you're likely seeing, it's definitely not all positive when it comes to Stalker 2, and beyond some of the negatives I mentioned throughout this video, there are some more overt criticisms that have popped up quite a few times. Lots of reviewers had this weird mix of impressions of how dated or not Stalker 2 felt, with some of the gameplay components feeling a decade old, and they may literally be. Stalker 2 had a very long dev cycle, but then some other aspects of this game feel and look modern and awesome. So it's kind of this weird dichotomy where, again, some aspects of the game will feel really dated, while some other aspects of the game look and feel super modern. But almost every reviewer also mentioned how the game is either super buggy or just downright unfinished right now. Too many bugs were mentioned in literally every single review I consumed, but this may be somewhat misleading as of today. So what happened was last night, the night before the review embargo lifted, and of course the actual release of the game, Stalker 2 got a new update that seems to have resolved quite a few of the bugs mentioned in reviews. So some of the bugs, like weapons not making a sound as you fire them, are reportedly fixed by this latest update. But considering it was so close to the embargo lifting, a lot of reviews were already done and still talking about bugs that are now fixed. So some reviews did update to actually address this and did mention how a bunch of bugs were resolved. One review said nearly all of the bugs they encountered were resolved, but considering the timing of this, it's really hard to gauge which bugs are still here versus which ones aren't. And overall, when looking at the bugs and performance, things are described as just rough with this game. There are a variety of crashing issues being reported, a lot of these being just crashing as you're playing the game, but separately, a lot of people can't actually get into the game, including me. It seems like there's a fundamental bug with certain Intel CPUs right now where you just can't get past the shader loading screen. For me, it's crashed every time and actually blue screened my computer several times. Performance was described as consistently being really bad. There are huge variations in FPS, and things are just overall inconsistent. Even at 60 FPS, this game could feel really bad due to some of the frame lag that would come in. Stutters were common on PC. Several reviewers mentioned some kind of recurrent quest issue that would suddenly lead to brutal stuttering, and that could only be fixed by a game restart. Going into towns is absolutely brutal on your overall performance. And while some of the upscalers like DLSS and particularly DLSS frame generation did help to offset this, there were still frame timing issues, so even though your FPS was high, things didn't feel perfect, even on ultra high-end systems. Thankfully, Stalker 2 is a virtually bug-free game, but it does have quite a few anomalies that happen to take on the appearance of bugs. I'm not going to break down every bug reported, again, because I don't know what was fixed, but also that would just take a really long time. And thankfully, from all the reviews I read, the vast majority of bugs were not exactly progress blocking, at least not in the typical way. Like nearly all the reviews described how you could technically complete the corresponding quest, but plenty of bugs made it so progressing that quest was notably more difficult than it should have been, like a quest marker just not being in the right place. Several mentioned having that issue and having to basically figure out how to progress things on their own. Beyond that, a wide array of AI, visual, and sound issues are currently present, and while these didn't really block progress, they did make progressing the game far less enjoyable for many reviewers, and more than one reviewer mentioned how it feels like it could be quite a while before all of these bugs are resolved just due to how many there were. It's not like there's going to be 1 or 2 patches to get things sorted. It sounds like it might be months to potentially even a year of updates. And to be clear, this wasn't just among the negative reviews, even all of the positive reviews also mentioned these bugs, with several saying that you should probably just wait to play this game because it's literally too buggy right now. And when it came to some of the reviewers' conclusions, things were pretty consistent. Almost every single review, even the negative ones saying not to play, described Stalker 2 as a clear labor of love and a game that would be amazing one day. The core features here and when things work as intended is really something special. This game is something special. It still won't be a game for everyone based off how it's designed with some of these grueling components, but for those that do enjoy the system, they should really enjoy this game, particularly for Stalker fans. This seems like it's going to be something really special that many Stalker fans will really love, and where reviewers really differed is whether or not you should play Stalker 2 right now. Almost everyone said that yeah, this game is worth playing at some point, although some said that it's worth playing right now, even despite the bugs, while some others said that no, you should just wait because the bugs are going to get too annoying and you'll play a better version of this game down the line. With that said, if you're interested in more Stalker 2 content, get subscribed because believe me, I have a lot coming.